you understand. Well, she got her height from me, but you can tell what she got from Betty. She got her height from me. That's all. When I stand and I look at these pictures, and that is Betty. That's not our daughter. It looks just like our daughter, but it's Betty. She worked on an Air Force base, and she worked in the repair facility for C-130s. And every year she worked for a colonel that held the annual, the military day where everybody comes out and they fly the planes and do all the fancy shows and stuff. Well, she was his assistant. And but they took her up in the C-130s from time to time and put her in the co-pilot seat. And she used to fly for a little bit. They didn't trust her much. The pilot still kept the stick. He didn't give it to her. I look at these pictures. Some of them I haven't seen in many, many years. But now I realize why I fell in love with her. And that's over 50 years ago. We were married over 51 years. And I look at this and I see, well, that's enough of that. I don't want to get too mushy. But I just want to tell you all a few little stories about Betty because I know nobody ever told you these things. And when we were in San Ramon, whatever Betty did it the best. She learned, she did things. And she typed over 120 words a minute with few errors. It was one of the things she came up and did. Well, a gentleman in the church up there we were involved in was going to write a book for Arthur Blessed. I don't know if you know who Arthur Blessed is. He's the man who walked around the world with the cross on his shoulder and walked around the world. And so he asked Betty if she would type up the manuscript, and she says, okay. So she'd sit there at night with the earphones on the transcript machine and be typing. I don't know, they had like 30 or 40 hours of interviews with him that she was typing for this book. And she'd be sitting there laughing away because if you've ever read the book or you ever knew about Arthur Blessed, he did some crazy things. He did. I remember one time she was sitting there laughing and I said, what are you laughing about? She said, well, here's Arthur. He's talking about he was overseas somewhere and he's walking down the street with a cross. And there was a tunnel there. And he says, well, I'll just take this shortcut through this tunnel. So he walked through this tunnel with a cross and come out the other side, and the place is packed. There's a big crowd there. And he's walking down there, and all these security people are coming after him, and the cameras are on him and everything else. And he says, well, what's the matter? He says, that's where the president's supposed to come out of. You're not supposed to come out of there. And the thing is, the cameras and the news caught it. And the next day, he had a meeting there, and thousands of people showed up because he walked through there. How many of us are going to do that? How many of us are going to do something that's kind of crazy, and you think it's crazy, but yet it's God. And he just brought the people out and everything. And that was wonderful. But Betty had a wonderful life. She really did. We traveled a lot, did a lot of things. You think at times you're not accomplishing anything in your life because you go here, you go there, and you don't see things. But Betty was always willing to reach out to people and touch her. A lot of your lives she touched. And she did things and everything. And that was a beautiful part about her. And I see what the pastor's saying about her daughter. That God's putting I don't know if he's moving a mantle or what, but it's good. Bless you. So, no, I just wanted to say a few things I got to say about Betty because it was a beautiful 50 years. We had our bounces in the road, Y'all have bounces. You hit a little bump and stuff. And if you ever drove around the streets of Sholo, you get the feeling every day. You hit the little bumps in the road. But yet we communicated and we worked them out. And we'd always talk and work things out. We never let things get too far gone, because you do, and you're going to have a lot of problems. So we worked them out all the time through communications and showing our love to each other, and beautiful thing, you can sit and talk to each other. The last year was probably the hardest time of our lives. Our faith was tested, and it was tested hard, and we had to learn to walk in trust. And I'll tell you, you could get upset. You could say, God, what are you doing? Count me out. I'm walking off the road. But no. We had to learn to trust God in whatever happened. And God made great provisions. He did great things in the last year. Betty went to Mexico. It was her choice. She did not want biopsies. She did not want any surgery. She didn't want any of that. So it was her choice. The insurance was not there. They will not pay for that kind of alternative medicine. But I'm here to say God provided. Through the blessings of this church, the people, through the blessings from people from outside this church. Just recently, we paid off all medical bills for this last year. And it's God's provision. And we prayed last year knowing we were going in that it was going to cost. But yet God gave us peace about it. And God, every time you went to pay a bill, you didn't know where the money came from, but there it was. And that's the greatest thing, that God's provision. And testing our faith on healing. We'd pray and we sought God, and I really don't have a lot of answers. But yet I know that I have to trust God for what happened and for Betty. And she knew that too. That's why I say our faith was so pushed and pulled and whatever you want to call it for the last year. But God was there. And like the song said, God still heals. I can't explain it. Which brings up a little story that Betty was healed twice in her life before. Once for cancer and once because her hip was way out and her leg was shorter, and God grew it out and got it. But years ago, we had a friend in Oceanside. Well, he lived in close to Oceanside. But he took buses to Catherine Coleman every month when she would come to Los Angeles. And he was 80 years old. And Betty went with him and helped him to do it. Her and her sister went on the buses. And one time they were going to L.A. in the two buses in a row, and they're in the fast lane, 4 lanes of traffic going that way. And Betty looked up, and she saw the traffic was stopped, but the bus wasn't slowing down. The day before, they had worked on the brakes, and they put in something improperly, and the brakes failed. The bus went forward and hit the bus in front of them. It backed up, turned to the side, went off of the freeway onto the shoulder of the highway and stopped, and never got hit by another vehicle. The gentleman who was 80 years old, who was in the front seat, and God told him, stand up. He stood up, and when the bus hit, the glass broke and came back and got all in his eyes and body and stuff. But his feet caught on something. I don't know what. God hooked his feet on something, and it didn't throw him out through the windshield into the other bus. And usually when a vehicle hits, it'll hit, back up, and hit again. Well, it turned and went off the side of the road. The gentleman was a good friend of Catherine Coleman's. And they took him to the hospital. And, well, they took Betty and the other people, too. And Catherine heard about this at the service. When the service was over, she came down to the hospital to see Mr. Miller was his name because she knew him. And she came into the room and she says, Mr. Miller, it's Catherine. And he says, no, you're a little girl. You got to remember his eyes were full of glass and stuff on the windshield. She said, no, it's Catherine. He says, no, you're a little girl. Catherine's a grown woman. And she reached out her hand and touched his leg. And every broken bone in his body went back together. So you see, we believe in healing. You know, I believe God could have healed Betty, but it was not his will at that time. I think he needed another good angel in heaven. And it goes back to Joey Feek, who died about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, from cancer. She was a singer, sang hymns and inspirational songs. I don't know if you've seen her or heard of her. But Joey was in the hospital, and she had cancer. And this is what brings the story back to her. She was walking down the hall talking to a lady, and the lady says, how do you have such strength with what all is going on in your life and the cancer and stuff? And she stopped and she turned around and she looked at the lady. She says, if I die today, I win. I'm going to be with the Lord. If I don't die today, I trust that God will take me through what's on the other side that I got to go through. And a few days later, the doctor walked into her room and said, Joey, he says, the chemotherapy's not working. He says, there's nothing we can do for you. And you know what that is? That's a death sentence. When they say they can't do anything else for you, they're going to send you home. But I'm saying all this to say God heals. That I have been tried in that thing all year about God healing. I don't know why he heals one and not the other. But I know whichever way it goes, we win. I know that because he has told us, and I believe it. And talking to Betty and stuff for the last year, you know, it's just, like I say, we have had our faith tested and everything. But I just want to say that in memory of Betty, and thanking all of you for the love she had for you and all the love you gave her, that we need to trust God because he's there. Okay.
Praise God. Thank you, Brother Ron.